work. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is state court work and where we are as a judiciary here in the state. And what I learned from watching that presentation on Wednesday night from your Griffin is that League of Women Voters was pretty much created around the 19th Amendment, right? So we know how important courts are, especially as women. We know, especially for myself as a person of color, as a Black woman, I know how important the courts have been in my life. So I want to make sure that we do a really good discussion this morning just to set the stage about what state courts look like here in the state of Pennsylvania. If you are someone who's really knowledgeable about this, maybe this would be something, maybe you might tune out for a moment, but if you're new to the courts, I'm going to try to keep it really interesting for you this morning. I like to make the court talk fun. It's not the sexiest subject in the world. I can say, let's talk about the judiciary, and sometimes the eyes glaze over. So I'm going to do my best to keep us all engaged this morning and excited. It is 10:30 on a Saturday. So we're gonna have a really good discussion today. I do have a PowerPoint presentation, which I'll bring up and take down and bring up and take back down. I like to see your faces. I like to be engaged with you. I wish I was in the same room with you right now, having this conversation, but we know that this is somewhat easier. You didn't have to get out of bed and go to a library of some sort. You can stay right here and maybe half of you are all the way dressed and maybe just the bottom half of you are dressed this morning, who knows? But it's good to see you in the Zoom room. So let's get started about this conversation about the state courts. And then we're going to go into the conversation about the judicial redistricting efforts that are happening here in our state legislature. And I'm going to start with the state courts presentation, and then we'll hold for questions until I get through that, and then we'll break for some questions, and then we'll get into the judicial redistricting, which you may have heard on Wednesday night being also referred to as judicial gerrymandering. All right, so I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint, so let's get started. I won't be able to see you when my PowerPoint comes up, but I hope that everything goes well. So here we go. All right, if someone could just come off mute and tell me that everything looks okay, I will get going.
Khadija, you look good. There is a message or two that your audio is going in and out a little bit, so maybe if you speak on the slower side, people won't miss anything if the internet lets us down.
All right, thank you so much. All right, well, here we go. Why courts matter. Let's talk about the state courts. So we're going to talk about the Pennsylvania judiciary, otherwise known as the courts. So our state courts here, so there's due to federalism, right? So I'm going to take us all back to Civics 101 from the 10th grade. For some of us, that may have been a few years ago. For some of us, maybe a little more than a few years ago. But due to federalism, both the federal government and each state government have their own court systems. So state courts are the some of us that may have been a few years ago. For some of us, maybe a little more than a few years ago. But due to federalism, both the federal government and each state have their own. All right, so state courts are the final arbiters of state laws and constitution. Their interpretation of the federal law or the United States Constitution may be appealed to the United States Supreme Court. So there's levels to this, right? So we're going to start at the bottom, the courts. You may see the minor courts as the municipal courts, the municipal district courts. Maybe it's like a traffic court. They hear cases about speeding tickets, etc. Then there's the common court of pleas, and you also vote for these courts. The courts of common pleas are in your district, so by county. So these are elections you have by county. These are trial cases, trial courts. They hear cases about, child welfare, spousal issues. Common pleas courts may hear about issues about victimization and crime. And then you have the appellate courts, and here you have the intermediate appellate courts. And the intermediate appellate courts are your Superior Court and your Commonwealth Court, and we'll talk about those. And then at the pinnacle of all the courts here in Pennsylvania, we have the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So the Pennsylvania Supreme Court was established in 1895, the Superior Court, established in 1895. It is one of two intermediate appellate courts here in Pennsylvania. The other one is the Commonwealth Court, and it's often the final arbiter of legal disputes. So just like the United States Supreme Court, most cases will not get to see the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Like the US Supreme Court, they hear maybe 100 cases a year. So you don't, most likely your case will not get to see the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. There are 15 judges that sit on this court, and their cases are usually heard by panels of 3 that sit in Harrisburg, Philadelphia, or Pittsburgh, but a full panel of 9 judges can also hear the case. And you should know, again, I founded in 1895, these judges that we elect currently as statewide serve 10-year terms in a partisan election. There is usually 15 judges on the Superior Court. Currently, there are 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans sitting on the bench. There is currently 1 vacancy. You should also know that the Pennsylvania Superior Court is the only appellate court here in Pennsylvania that has a person of color on it. So of 31 different judges that sit on appellate courts, only 1 currently is a person of color. And so here's your Superior Court judges. It's nice to sometimes put a face to these folks. They sit in and we don't typically always know who they are, but here's an opportunity for you to see. We have President Judge Jack Piniella, all right? And I want you to pay attention to this. If you can zoom in or you can see this clearly on your screen, I want you to take note of where these judges are from. Actually, President Judge Piniella, Brooklyn, New York. And then President Judge Emeritus is also from Pennsylvania, and he's from Westmoreland County. And we have some more here. We have Judge Alice DeBow, Judge Lazarus, Judge Nichols, which I mentioned is the only person of color who sits on our appellate courts here in Pennsylvania. You'll see that they're from places like Wynwood, Pennsylvania, which I believe is Delaware County, Brooklyn, New York, Philadelphia. I'm trying to hide this bar here for you. And you'll see that they have educations that come out of Pennsylvania, Temple Law for 2 of these women, University of Pennsylvania. Right. And then we have Judge McCaffrey, who just got elected not too long ago. He's just started serving his first term in January of 2020 from Philadelphia. Judge Kunzelman out of, she was actually born in Germany. You have Judge Shogun, born in New York. Judge Olson out of Pittsburgh, Judge Maria McLaughlin out of Philadelphia, Judge Bowes out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And again, you see the representation of Pennsylvania law schools too, and Widener here in Pennsylvania, Delaware Law School of Widener, Georgetown for a BA, University of Pittsburgh for law, Duquesne University. Judge Murray, unfortunately, we were unable to get where Judge Murray was born. If anyone knows Judge Murray, let us know. We'd like to know where Judge Murray was born. We have Judge King out of Wilmington, Delaware, and then also Judge Staple out of New York, born in New York. So you can see a lot of our judges on the Superior Court weren't actually even born in the state of Pennsylvania. And just so that we can kind of humanize, what it is that these courts do and is that they hear, you'll see here that this is a case that seen by the Superior Court. Is a young Westmoreland County gentleman here. He was excited. His name was James Jr. He wanted to follow in his father's footsteps and become a junior firefighter. And just months shy of his 14th birthday, his life was taken by a friend of his, who, after unloading the clip from his father's handgun, unwittingly shot JR with a chambered bullet. And in September of 2020, the Pennsylvania Superior Court found that the Federal Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act to be unconstitutional, allowing JR's family to seek accountability and justice for JR's death. So this is just an example for you to see what kind of cases are being heard and who's impacted by these cases, like young JR. All right, then we get into the Commonwealth Court. The Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court was established in 1968, and it is uniquely Pennsylvania. There is no Commonwealth Court in other places. It's uniquely Pennsylvanian. It is the second statewide appellate, intermediate appellate court, going along with the Superior Court. It's responsible for matters involving state and local governments and regulatory agencies. And it will hear Pennsylvania school funding lawsuits. It will hear cases such as the League of Women Voters v. Wolf, otherwise known as the gerrymandering case of not too long ago. And here's a look at who your Commonwealth Court judges are. Again, this is currently a court that we vote for on a statewide basis. You get to vote for all 9 judges that sit on the Commonwealth Court. Currently, 7 of them are Republicans and 2 of them are Democrats. And this is also a partisan election, and they are up for retention after 10 years being on the bench. These are your Commonwealth Court judges. Judge Covey, she is out of Wilmington, Delaware. Judge Seisler, out of Philadelphia. Judge Cannon, out of Media, Delaware County. Judge McCullough, out of Pittsburgh. Judge, I don't want to say this wrong. Judge Dublier, out of Pittsburgh. President Judge Kevin Brokeson, out of Lycoming County on Toursville. Judge Crompton, he was an appointment by Governor Wolf. He's out of Montgomery County. You have Judge Wojcik, out of Somerset County, and then Judge Leavitt, out of Cleveland, Ohio. So here's another way for us to continue to humanize these courts and the cases that are heard by the Commonwealth Court here in Pennsylvania. You have Miss Lorraine Hall here, who's a Philadelphia resident. She was a plaintiff in the 2019 lawsuit against the ballot question involving the Marsy's Law before the election. Many of you may remember this because this was not this past election, but the election before this was on our ballot here in Pennsylvania to vote on the Marsy's Law. Lorraine is someone who lost both her brother and son to crime. But you'll see here that on January 7th, just the other day, the Commonwealth Court ruled that Marsy's Law is unconstitutional and invalidated the referendum votes that we all cast during that election, and stating that the law was trying to change too many things at once. Many of you may have paid attention to the Marsy's Law referendum as it was going through. It was very broad and it didn't explain it so well on the ballot. And as you can see, the Commonwealth Court invalidated the votes. So let's get now finally to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. The Pennsylvania judiciary system originated here in 1684, established by William Penn, who we are named after. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court is the highest in the state and the oldest in the nation. In 1722, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and the Court of Common Pleas were located in Philadelphia, Bucks, and Chester counties. And in 1776, the Pennsylvania Constitution established the Court of Common Pleas in each county here in Pennsylvania, or how many counties we did have in 1776. So the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, as we just heard, is the oldest in the United States. It is the highest appellate court here in Pennsylvania. There are 7 justices that serve 10-year terms in a partisan election. We get to vote for all 7 Supreme Court justices currently. The makeup is 5 Democrats and 2 Republicans. Currently, Chief Justice Thomas Saylor is the Chief Justice. He is from Somerset County. He will be retiring soon. He was retained for 2 terms in 2007 and 2017, and he is going to age out basically and finish up his term. He will be replaced. The next Chief Justice of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court will be Justice Deborah Todd out of Lawrence County. She lives in Elwood City, or was born in Elwood City, I should say. And that's making history here in the state of Pennsylvania with our first Chief Justice being a woman. Justice Weck out of Baltimore, Justice Dougherty out of Philadelphia, and Justice Max Baer out of Pittsburgh. And then to round those out, Justice Mundy, who was initially appointed by Governor Wolf to fill a vacancy. She was elected on her own right just not too long ago. And she's from Elmira, New York. And then Justice Donahue out of Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania. And finally here, just so you have another idea of these cases that are heard by the Supreme Court, we have Kiera here, a Delaware County resident. She never received her mail-in ballot. Many of you, or hopefully not, maybe some folks realize that was an issue for some. She never received her mail-in ballot, so she had to vote provisionally in the 2020 general election. And she received a letter in the mail stating her ballot and right to vote was being challenged. Because Pennsylvania's appellate courts, and specifically the Supreme Court, they rejected the attempts to contest the provisional and mail-in ballots. And so Kiera's ballot and her voice was heard. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court protected her sacred right to vote. Some of you may know Jordy Comus. Jordy Comus is a We the People Pennsylvania top activist out of Union County. He was actually part of your lawsuit here. So he states here, if you know you are voting for the politicians who choose you through gerrymandering instead of politicians we elect, then our faith in this whole project of democracy is at risk, is his quote. In January of 2018, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court declared the 2011 congressional map unconstitutional, and a new map was put in its place. So just an idea for you. I'm going to take this down for a second because we're done with this portion. And I'll stop my share. All right. So that was a lot of information. And as you can see, Pennsylvania does a really good job of electing women to the bench in Pennsylvania. Did you see all those ladies? Compared to other states across the country, Pennsylvania does a phenomenal job of electing women. I can tell you is the work that I've done on federal courts, Pennsylvania is actually the second worst in the entire nation. The Third Circuit Court of Appeals, of which our federal courts sit, is the second worst in the nation at putting women on the bench. So those are appointed judgeships. But in the state courts, we do a great job of putting women on the bench. And I can tell you, studies have been done that prove that when women sit on panels, on benches, men do a much better job of paying attention to cases, particularly those that involve civil rights. So it's always a good thing to have that representation of women on the bench. I see you, Rebecca. I appreciate the clap and I like to see it. Anyone have any questions about the courts, the state courts?
Betsy had a question. Betsy, if I understand it correctly, it was there are seven. Is it a coincidence there are 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans? Is that the Supreme Court, or is that on purpose?
No. So the Supreme Court has 7 judges on the Supreme Court, which is a 5-2. That was actually the Superior Court. That was it's usually 15 judges. There's a vacancy. It's currently 7 and 7 split. So that will be an election popping up here for you soon, to put that 15th judge and figure out how that's going to work there with that court. So I can't say it's on purpose. It's just the way that voters voted. Yes, Connie, come off mute. You're on mute, Connie. We can't hear you, Connie.
Sorry. I understand that Justice Saylor is retiring or is aging out this year, but
Yes.
why is he on the ballot for the primary if he turns 75 during the year? I don't understand this.
You know, I haven't checked. I can tell you, I haven't even checked the ballot for May as of yet, but he does age out. He will be replaced because he does age out. So
He's just going to stay on for to the very last minute, and then during the year when he turns 75, he steps down.
he does.
And then there's an election.
And that could lead to an appointment.
An appointment.
Yeah. And as someone mentioned in the chat box, I see that they mentioned that Governor Wolf has appointed lots of Republicans. He has. He's appointed 2 Republicans to the bench during his time. You know that when the governor appoints someone to the bench, it does have to get approval from the Senate. So the current makeup of the Pennsylvania Senate, it would require a judge that could get approval. So Judge Mundy was one. She was nominated and then appointed to the bench, and then she won an election in her own right. And then Drew Compton is the other, and Drew Compton was actually worked as chief of staff for one of the senators, and he was appointed as well. And he'll have to run for his seat in this election coming up.
And is Saylor a Republican or a Democrat?
Saylor is a Republican.
So it'll be a fight then to get a Democrat on there, I guess. Yeah. All right. Understand.
All right.
So
Okay.
I have 2 questions. One is, I mean, this is came through loud and clear that the lack of, when people say there's a lack of diversity on the courts, I would say that there's pretty good diversity in terms of gender and geography, but not so good in terms of race. You said there is only, is it true, only 1 person of color on the appellate courts?
Absolutely, 1 out of 31, which makes it 4% of our appellate courts include a person of color.
So we need to do a better job there. The election of these, when people say they're up for retention. Does that mean that that they'll be on the ballot again? Is that what that means? At the end of their 10-year term, they have to run on the ballot again?
Yeah, so absolutely. So after someone serves a 10-year term, they're up for retention. And the retention ballot is actually a nonpartisan because there's no R or D or I after their name when they're up for retention. It just will say their name and you vote yes or no to retain them in position or not. It's a simple yes or no question on the ballot.
Interesting.
And we have a very similar system to Illinois, and we'll talk about that in a second when we get into judicial redistricting.
Khadija, there's a couple other questions. Can we read them?
Sure.
From Bonnie, how many state reps in Bucks do we need to vote no to have a chance of success to stop this bill?
So we haven't gotten into the judicial redistricting talk yet, so let's get to that. We'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
About the courts.
Okay, and Pam, how many seats will appear on the ballot?
So there's going to be, I believe it's 4 vacancies in total for appellate courts, but then it depends upon where you live and what counties you live in. Bucks County, I wish I would have researched that prior to this. I'm not exactly sure how many common pleas judges you'll have vacancies for. If you want that information, you go to Ballotpedia. It's there, and I have our deputy of campaigns, Katie Personette, is joining us on the call, and she's quick with the internet. She may be able to get an answer for us for Bucks County.
So are states moving away from partisan elections of judges, or is it about equal? Or, I know that the league has always advocated merit selection.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So let's just go right into the talk about the judicial redistricting, and then judicial redistricting, and we'll get into that conversation, because I know that the league, have a really tight relationship with fair districts, which is very much in favor of merit selection. There are some other organizations such as ACLU not in favor of merit selection. I know, Ardith, you mentioned the question earlier about diversity. Folks tend to think that merit selection would help with that racial diversity here in Pennsylvania. So let's get into that conversation. So I'm going to pull the PowerPoint back up, so I won't be seeing your faces again, but let's get into this serious conversation. All right. So let me hide this at the bottom. All right, so right now it is all about protecting our courts in the moment. Obviously, we all watched things unfold in front of our eyes on Wednesday afternoon. And we watched the attack on the physical building and also on our republic and, things that we stand for here as a nation. And so we need to ensure that we are protecting our courts. Of all the branches of government, right? We have 3 co-equal branches of government. Of all of those co-equal branches of government, it's the judiciary that polls the best. We have the most trust in our judiciary, in our court system. This is where people go for justice. And it is an abstract idea, right? The courts tend to be abstract, and maybe many folks don't follow them, the ins and outs of them, but we know that we appreciate the courts. And so we must ensure that we preserve the independence of the courts, and we'll talk about what that means. So what does judicial independence mean? What does it mean when we say we need to protect the independence of the judiciary? Well, there's lots of different principles as it relates to an independent judiciary. One is that our courts be impartial, free from conflict and undue influence. We want them to be ethical. We want them to follow clearly defined rules of behavior. We want them to be fairly selected in as far as impartial way as possible, where the process is insulated from political pressures. We want our courts to be transparent. We want them to operate with full disclosure of a judge's financial obligations and ties and interests, trying to influence this judge that's elected by us and how judges are selected. Judicial independence means that we need to evaluate and monitor performance and regularly evaluate it in neutral, nonpartisan, non-interest groups ways. And then the resourcing, the public funding, fully funding our courts and keeping them protected. We have a budget battle here in the state of Pennsylvania. Due to COVID and other things, we're going to have a $4 billion gap in our budget here in the state. And so typically when we have a gap in our budget, we cut funding for education, or funds are cut for social programs here in the state. We want to ensure that the courts aren't cut out of the budget when that happens to us. and discretion. To be an independent judicial independence means that we have to have the ability to make appropriate decisions, the courts do, and appropriate decisions accounting for specific circumstances. And if I can just touch on these independently for a second, because we're going to talk about the judicial redistricting you may have heard about. For instance, when we talk about, we want our courts to be impartial, right? Free from conflicts of interest and undue influence. And we're going to talk about what that means when you're going to see an explainer video here in a second. But then also keeping them free from politics. You know, I'm here representing Why Courts Matter, Pennsylvania. We are a nonpartisan organization, just as you are, the League of Women Voters, which means I'm not here to tell you who to vote for. That's not my job here today. There is political talk that needs to happen today to have this conversation truly. And we can have political talk without it being partisan. But we have to understand that to keep these courts free from undue influence of the other branches of government, the legislative branch or the executive branch, we have to ensure the impartiality of our courts and keep them separate from those other branches. They are co-equal branches of government. Legislature should not have any influence over the judges that we select in the state of Pennsylvania. All right, so here's a quick explainer video. It's a nice little cartoon. Those of you who, like myself, grew up on Schoolhouse Rock, you might find this in that same vein.
Hey, Pennsylvania. You know how we've been fighting gerrymandering? Where politicians draw legislative maps that give them an unfair advantage and take away democratic power from voters? Well, those same politicians want to do the same thing to our judicial elections. Judicial gerrymandering changes how we elect judges to our state's highest courts, including the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. We elect judges statewide today. A proposed constitutional amendment would give legislators the power to create districts to elect judges. And just as they gerrymander legislative maps to favor their preferred candidates, legislators would do that with judicial districts as well. So why is this so bad? It's pretty simple. Judicial districts are a solution in search of a problem. Look at our judges and justices, and you will see that they are from all over the state. But electing judges in districts could make it more difficult to put the best qualified judges on the bench in particular elections in the future. We want the best qualified candidates from the state to be judges in our courts, no matter where they are from. There is no Montgomery County or Elk County way to interpret statutes and the Pennsylvania Constitution. Most importantly, electing judges in legislator-drawn districts would undermine the independence of the courts and the separation of powers. Allowing legislators to influence who gets on our courts would enable them to influence the decisions they make, undermining the checks and balances so critical to our Constitution. Our appellate courts make major decisions regarding civil liberties and rights, educational funding, environmental protection, and gerrymandering itself. We must protect the independence of our courts. Hey, Pennsylvania.
All right, so hopefully that was helpful for some folks to kind of understand what you do. Redistricting means, otherwise known as gerrymandering, you have mean several places. And so just like there is the gerrymandering that League of Women Voters fought against very recently, there are other types of redistricting opportunities, such as, there's political gerrymandering, there's partisan gerrymandering, otherwise known as partisan gerrymandering, there's racial gerrymandering, there's prison gerrymandering. There's also now judicial gerrymandering or redistricting. And so what we see right now is we have legislators in the halls of Harrisburg currently who would like to change the way in which we elect our judges. Currently, we elect all of those judges statewide. What they would like to do is to make sure that the judges will be broken up into districts. So we have 7 justices that sit on the Supreme Court. They would be broken up into 7 districts across Pennsylvania, and you would only get to vote for 1 Supreme Court justice instead of the 7 And as we mentioned earlier, these cases are heard by panels of 3 or more. And so you have an opportunity that the day that you go before the judge and you want to seek justice, you would only have the opportunity to have voted judges, not all 3 or not all 7. So this is an opportunity for us to lose some of our power as constituents, as voters. This would change the way in which we elect our judges. And it's known as House Bill 196 when it passed the last time. We'll talk about that. It is now currently House. So when we're talking about these attacks on our democracy and the attacks on our independent judiciary, there's historical perspective to this. Some of you may have been around during the civil rights movement and era, knowing that there were cases that came out of the United States Supreme Court that ended racial discrimination here in this country, the Earl Warren Court of the United States Supreme Court. And during that time when all those cases were being heard and Jim Crow was being undone in this country, we had a movement of folks who wanted to impeach the Supreme Court justices for the decisions that they were making to undo Jim Crow. They called for the impeachment of Supreme Court justices. We had that same thing happen here in the state of Pennsylvania after the 2019 case that ended the partisan maps here in the state. We had legislators in the halls of Harrisburg calling for the impeachment of our Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices. Right now, we're in a situation where Pennsylvania has made lots of national news. If you watch what happened at 2 in, actually that was then 2 in on Thursday, as votes, the electors' votes were being counted, you could see all the different US Congress people who are talking about Pennsylvania and our election and our courts. So our courts here in Pennsylvania are definitely under attack from other groups who want to silence or who are not in favor of the decisions that have been made by this court that we've elected. So it's a historical perspective, and it's recently the attacks that we're seeing on our judiciary. Why is the bill problematic? Why is now House Bill 38 problematic? Is that it's going to change the way in which we elect our judges. We've done it this way for a long time, and there's no reason for us to need to break into districts. I'll tell you that the states who have done that, who have changed from statewide elections to voting in districts, are states that were mostly Southern states that had to do that and to keep in step with the VRA, the Voting Rights Act. We're talking about Southern states who had Jim Crow laws that stopped Black folks and others from voting, and therefore they did need to break themselves up into regional districts so that they can ensure that the vote of Black folks was counted and that they were receiving justice. There's no reason for the state of Pennsylvania to break us up into districts, to vote by district or vote by regions. There is no geographic diversity issue on our courts, as you saw where these judges come from and where they live. There is no problem with women getting on the bench here in Pennsylvania as we elect them statewide. You did see how we have an issue with folks of color being elected statewide, and that will not be addressed by House Bill 38. House Bill 38 does not tell us how they're going to help ensure that there's representation on the courts for folks of color in the state. That is not what House Bill 38 is intended to do. So where is the bill now? What has happened with the bill? So it initially, it kicked off in 2018. There were organizations such as Why Courts Matter and the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center and Fair Districts and many others who, talked about this, but it basically moved in silence, and it moved through both the House and the Senate. It got voted out mainly on partisan lines. It had a closer vote in the Senate. I think it only won by 2 votes in the Senate to move forward. It's a change to our Pennsylvania Constitution, and therefore it will reach a ballot. It will reach our ballot possibly as early as this May. It has to pass, because it's a change to our Pennsylvania Constitution, it has to pass 2 consecutive sessions. So it passed this last session, the 2019-2020 session, and it needs to pass this 2021 to 2022 session right now. If it does that by the middle of February, it will be allowed to be on our ballot in May. It has to move through the House and the Senate by the middle of February to be on our ballot in May. If the same folks who voted for it last time do it again, it will pass again. And if we know anything about ballot questions here in the state of Pennsylvania, we know that Pennsylvanians like to vote yes on ballot questions. We have a history of voting yes on ballot initiatives. People do that. If they're not aware of what the ballot question is about, they'll get into the poll. You know, they get behind the curtain and they see that ballot question. It sounds really good. It's worded really nicely. And people don't want to say no to what they don't know they're saying no to. So they say yes to these things. We saw this with Marcy's Law. And then we see what just happened in the Commonwealth Court with them invalidating Marcy's Law referendum question for us. So this is something that we need to fight back against. If you're someone who believes that the way we currently vote for our judges is perfectly fine, I for one am someone who, if I'm able to vote for it, I want to vote for it. You know, the power is within the people, right? The power is within the people. And if I have the right to vote, I want to vote for it. And if there are 7 judges sitting on a bench, I want to vote for all 7, not just the one that some legislator tells me I'm allowed to vote for. That's what House Bill 38 will do, which we think it's going to do, because I can tell you this, there's no accompanying legislation to it. We don't even know how they're going to break up the districts. Who's responsible to break up Bill 38 as it stands right now? It is very problematic for many reasons. And if you look at the landscape of what's happening in our state right now and what you watch transpire on your TV on Wednesday afternoon, we need to maintain this republic. We need to maintain our democracy. We need to protect our courts and the independent judiciary from undue assault from the legislative branch, who at this moment here in Pennsylvania is not very happy with decisions that the court has made. So that's kind of where we are here. I want to show you one more thing, and you can't see this. It's very small writing, and that's on purpose, because this is exactly what it looks like when the state government, Kathy Bookwar, put this out as the bill passed the first time. It is a public notice. This is the public notice that has to get published in 2 papers in each county to let voters know that there's going to be possibly a change to our Pennsylvania Constitution. This is the public notice. This one was one that was actually on Lancaster Online. So that was one of the papers in which it was published in Lancaster County. So this is Lancaster Online, very small print. It's probably like on the back page of your newspaper or what have you, where no one's going to read this. You look at this, it doesn't look like something I probably want to pay too much attention to, but it is the proposed amendments to the Constitution of Pennsylvania. It's a public notice to let us know. They're going to have to do this again. If this bill 38 passes out of the House and Senate by the middle of February, they're going to need 90 days notice to let the public know about a change to the Constitution. And this will come out again in a public notice, very small print, just like this, for us to read. And then I'll talk about this in a second. So I'm going to stop my share and see your faces. All right, I did a lot of talking, and I haven't seen the chat box because I had the presentation up. But I would like to know what you all think. If I can get a show of hands currently, I just want to do my own unscientific poll. Those of you whose video is up, so I appreciate seeing your faces. If you are not showing your face, please do jump on. Yes, thank you. I'd like to see a show of hands, or you can use the emojis here and the reactions at the bottom. Who cares where judges live currently that sit on our appellate courts? Who cares about where they actually live? Okay. A couple people care. All right. Who would like for us to continue to vote for our appellate court judges statewide as we currently do? Who's in favor of us voting for our judges statewide? Okay, I see the thumbs up. All right, so there was a few of you that did say that you like to have some geographic diversity, and I want to talk about that a little bit. We got some help from the Brennan Center. I don't know if you're familiar with the Brennan Center out of New York City, but they help with the research on this, because why courts matter, we don't have time to go dig deep, and we rely on some sources that can help us with these resources. And what they tell us, and what you should know, is that geographic diversity as it relates to our appellate courts, it shouldn't really matter too much, because appellate court judges are not beholden to you as the voter. They don't owe you anything. Our appellate court judges are beholden to our Pennsylvania Constitution and the law. There is nothing different about what happens in Elk County, what happens in Bucks County, what happens in Allegheny County. that makes any determination about a case's ruling as it relates to our Pennsylvania Constitution, there really is no need for, for this talk about geographic diversity, although you see that there is no issue with geographic diversity currently on our state appellate courts. They come from all over, if they even come from Pennsylvania at all. So, I want to talk about that because there is something, I'm not a lawyer and I only play one here when I talk about why courts matter. I'm a journalist by trade, right? I'm not a lawyer. So I'm not going to get into the legalese, and you probably appreciate that too. But there is this thing called the linkage interest, all right? A technical term, the linkage interest. And if we start ensuring that judges have to come from a certain region in Pennsylvania, they may have a very invested interest about their particular county. Maybe if they live in Chester County, they have a really serious interest about the pipelines. And that may change the way they rule about pipelines because they live in Chester County. Well, the way they rule about pipelines should have nothing else to do but besides what it has to do about our Pennsylvania Constitution, not about what the voters are concerned about, here in Chester County, and that they could vote them in and out. That changes the rulings of judges. It makes them beholden to you as voters and not beholden to the Pennsylvania Constitution. If you care about geographic diversity, you get that. You get to vote for your common pleas judges. That's where most of the cases are heard. Most of these cases never reach appellate courts. So if you care about the special interest of you and living in a particular county, care about that for your common pleas courts. You vote for them by regions or by counties. That's where you're going to get the geographic issues met that we have as constituents. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania doesn't owe voters anything. They're not beholden to us. They're not beholden to the legislature. They're an independent branch of government, and they are only beholden to the Pennsylvania Constitution. We don't have a geographic diversity issue here in the state. I'm not looking at the chat. It would be helpful if you click, Christina. Is there anything in there I need to see?
Sure. Well, just that earlier question about how many state reps do we need to vote no to have a chance of success to stopping the bill?
So again, I'm a nonpartisan organization, Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania. I'm not here to tell you who to vote for, but I can definitely give you some facts, right? Because it's public knowledge. So Bucks County, you all, it passed House Bill 196 as it was before. It's now House Bill 38. As it passed before, it passed on a straight party line vote. I can tell you this information. It passed, all Democratic representatives and senators voted against it. Almost all Republicans voted for it. Republican no votes in the House were Representatives Gillen, Lawrence, Mert, and Quinn. Representatives Mako, Mazursky, Simmons, White, and Cruz were excused from voting. Representative Todd Stevens voted no in committee, but he voted yes when it came onto the House floor. Republican no votes in the Senate included Senator Killian and Laughlin, and Independent Senator Udacek voted no. All other votes were along party lines. So if you know who your state representative is, I'm sure Katie's quick with that. She put a link down there so you can see who your state representative, who your state senator is. Bucks County has, seven? You have 7 representatives total in Bucks County. 6 of 7 voted in favor of gerrymandering or in favor of districts.
We have 7 Republican state reps.
Okay. So they all voted yes. They all voted yes for judicial districting. So I'm not here to tell you who you need to reach out to. I'm not going to do that, but you're smart people, League of Women Voters, Bucks County. You know the calls that you need to make, or the emails that you need to write, or the conversations that need to be had based upon who voted for it the last time around. So I'll leave that up to you as smart.
Kadita, you said that there were just 2 that in the Senate, it passed just by a margin of 2. And it only needs to be defeated in the Senate or the House.
Correct. It only needs to be defeated in the Senate or the House. It has to pass both chambers to reach the ballot in May. So if the House, which is likely to maybe call on this by next week, this could go through committee as early as next week in the House. Then it would go to the Senate as early as the end of January when they're in session again to vote on this. So it's most likely because the way that the makeup is of our state legislature, if it passes very easily out of the House, and then it goes to the Senate, then they have a chance to fight it there. But right now, it's the House that's the quickest to get this on their desks.
So we should contact our reps early this week, this upcoming week.
Yes, I'm gonna give people some links and stuff at the end of this. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The other thing is that a lot of the state reps are claiming that they want the voters to have a choice on this, as opposed to them making the decision. We have to convince them that that's not a good idea, that going to a referendum is not helping, and that they should really look at this. The biggest problem is that this gives the legislature the control over who the judges are, because they can draw the lines. And the way they draw the lines, they can get rid of somebody they don't like. So having the legislature control our judiciary is completely antithetical to our separation of powers.
And you brought up a really good point there, Jean, about that and the different arguments that you're going to hear from folks who are this. One of those being that they think that if you're voting for your appellate court judge districts, that it will stop all of this dark money that comes into our races for Supreme Courts. They become very expensive. If you want to run for Supreme Court, it's become a very expensive business. Illinois, who I mentioned earlier, who has a very similar current situation to what Pennsylvania is trying to do, they had their most expensive Supreme Court race ever. Let me see if I can see it. They spent $10.7 million on their last Supreme Court race. $10.7 million for their Fifth Circuit or Fifth District Supreme Court seat. And 4.5 million of that 10.7 came from one person, one organization. It came from one gentleman who wanted to sway that situation there. So for folks to argue that this is going to take out the money or take away the dark money, it does not. It will not take away the dark money if we break into districts. If anything, it's easier for folks to have more sway, because it's cheaper to run a TV ad in Scranton than it is to run a TV ad in Philadelphia. It's cheaper for me if I want to buy a judge, to put that money into Elk County, because that's a judge that's coming out of Elk County. So we put all my money into Elk County. So the argument that this is going to take away all this dark money, it's not accurate. It's not accurate. And again, these judges are not beholden to us. And for legislators currently, the argument being, one, initially it was, this is all about geographic diversity. Well, now they're saying, we're mad at the courts for these decisions that they've made about this last election, and we're going to punish the courts, and we're going to leave it up to the voters to decide if they're mad at the courts about this past election too. That's not what this is about. That's not what the independent branch of our judiciary is about. And when it does get to the ballot, you saw that very small print I shared. It's going to read like it's a dream, right? But it says nothing on that ballot question about how they're going to break these up, how it's going to bring diversity. They don't even mention that they're breaking it up and changing the way we vote. That's not what the ballot question even reads. We know that from voting on previous ballot initiatives, how they word these things to make them sound great. It's going to be a lot of effort if this gets on the ballot in May to defeat it. A lot of dark money coming into the state of Pennsylvania. The Hawleys of the world and others wanting to get in on what Pennsylvania is doing, because what happens here in Pennsylvania can happen in other states across the country. I know my time is limited here. Maybe you have time for one more question?
Allie, did you have a question? You have your hand up. You can unmute yourself if you want to ask it. No, maybe she just has her hand up. Okay. Monica had a question. Is geographic diversity the only argument for this? Are there any other benefits they're claiming to, for this proposal to go through?
Yeah, so the prime sponsor of this bill is Lebanon County's Representative Russ Diamond. So initially they said that this is a way to bring diversity to the bench. But Russ Diamond did not mean any other kind of diversity besides geographic diversity, which would not help at all with racial diversity on the bench, for one. It doesn't mean it's going to help with gender diversity on the bench either, of which we don't have an issue. The other argument is just what I mentioned, is that they're saying that, they're mad at the courts. They're mad at the decisions that came out of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. You see what they're doing currently with the seating of Senator Brewster out in Allegheny County, not seating him and leaving it up to the courts and being mad at the courts about the decision, that the vote was certified, our election was certified. Senator Brewster won by 96, more than 96 votes, I think it was. He should be sad, but that they're gonna leave it up to the courts. So that's the other argument. They're gonna say, leave this up to the voters. The voters decide if they're mad enough at the courts that they wanna change the way in which we elect our judges. I wanna vote for all 31 of them. I don't wanna vote for 3 of them. I wanna vote for all 31. And that's if and we talked a little bit about merit selection earlier. There's a lot of good that comes out of merit selection. States that have merit selection, there's lots of good that those states have seen in terms of improving their racial diversity, gender diversity, by having merit selection. So I know that the argument is, I don't want to vote for judges anyway. I want it to be, merit selection. I want them to be appointed and have a commission that is going to ensure that there's diversity and such. So that's an argument too. But currently, as we are currently voting for our judges here in the state of Pennsylvania, if that's what we're going with currently, I don't want for Russ Diamond to determine which 3 judges I can vote for.
Thank you, Kadita. I think our time is nearly up. Many of you on this call obviously want to know what to do to stop this legislation and how you can help. One place that you can get information is the Fair Districts PA website. As you know, Fair Districts is an arm of the league, and it's known for its nonpartisan work on legislative gerrymandering, and it's taken on this issue as well. So you can go to that website and find out the contact information for your senator, your state senator and representative. And they also have some talking points you can use to write or to call them. Why Courts Matter also has information on their website. It's important to contact your legislator as their constituent, not as a league member. I think they're more interested in what their constituents think than what the League of Women Voters thinks. League of Women Voters is contacting them as well, but I think if you contact legislators as a constituent, that's much more effective. This is a really time-sensitive issue, and so if you could write or call soon. When you call, you usually either get an answering machine or a staffer, and that's fine. Leave your message, be clear and concise, and tell them that, where you live so that they know that you're their constituent. You can also contact legislative leaders, and there's information about that on the Fair Districts website as well. So I do urge everybody who thinks that letting the legislature control who is on our higher courts, on our appellate courts, is a dangerous move. I hope that all of you will contact your legislator. You can write and call, it never hurts, for them to hear from you, and tell your friends and spread the word. I'd also like to remind you, all the league members on the call, that in February, we're having a film discussion program, like we had the book discussion a month ago, about the documentary 13th. And it's about how the 13th Amendment led to mass incarceration in the United States. You'll be receiving information from Kathy Widener about this, and a link to sign up for one of the discussion groups. So please join us for that. It's an ongoing effort by our anti-racism subcommittee. So again, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this morning, and many, many thanks to Kadita for this really informative program and for answering all of our questions. If anybody else, yes, thank everybody.
Jean, if you don't mind, Jean, can I just have one more second here to say something?
Absolutely, go for
There's
it.
a question in the chat box that someone had asked if we could talk about the Jipa table. Jipa Table is Judicial Independence Project of Pennsylvania, Jipa. You may have heard that term come out on Wednesday's call with Fair Districts and with Common Cause and Legal and Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts, which will all sit at the Jipa table. This is a huge table. It's a huge fight back table of folks. And I'm not going to call it a coalition because we don't always agree about all issues. But this issue, we all agree that we need to fight back against this judicial redistricting. It includes good government groups like Common Cause. It includes civil rights organizations such as the NAACP, Equality PA. It has union supports, SEIU, AFT, teachers involved in this. There's more than right now 35 organizations that are all going to come together representing more than 100,000 Pennsylvanians to fight back against this initiative. And it is going to take all of us to do that. And so you'll see lots more of town halls like this and conversations about this issue because we have to fight it before the middle of February. That's our last chance to fight it there. Otherwise, we'll have to fight it at the polls, which will be very expensive and a very protracted business. So thank you. Thank you for having me today and letting me speak on this issue. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kadita.
Silent clap.
Thank you, Kadita. And thanks for everyone for attending. This is a good turnout.
Yes. Good day.
Thank you, Kadita.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Zita.
Thank you.
That was a great presentation. Learned a lot.
Thank you for making it so clear.
Yes, that's what I try to do, Cheryl. That's the goal here. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm speaking to it the way I know.
It made it much clearer than Wednesday's presentation.
And I'm glad we got something out of it today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there time for another quick question? No?
If I'm here, if anybody has another question or two, I have a couple more minutes. Do you want to stop the recording or do you want to keep going? Up to you. Someone had asked a question about, isn't the United States Supreme Court merit selection in a sense?